to the, I think it's September, but it's October, the year has just disappeared. October meeting of explanatory authority, and I need to send my thing. Apologies for absence, we've got Theo, got Philip and Evelyn Stacey. Evelyn isn't very well, so I've sent her all our best wishes and hope she gets better soon. Are there any others that we know of?
John Petrinos sent his apologies as of early this morning. He was taken unwell.
And John, we also sent our best wishes to, of course. Anybody else? No, here. Declarations of interest. I have none, Robin?
No. None. No.
No. Lee?
No, thank you. No.
Brilliant, thank you. Chairperson's announcement. Partnership plan launch, I know a lot of you have registered to go already, is the 16th of October. You need to register to go if you want to go. You've all been sent the link. And I think it's probably the main thing I'm going to announce today is that Christine Lawrence, after 24 years with us, has retired. And I'm going to be sending round this card, which I would like you all to sign. Now there is a time limit, so don't keep it in front of you, because unfortunately I have to leave here at 12:30, and I do want to be putting this in the post. So Francis has been tasked with making sure it doesn't get dilly-dally anywhere.
Why?
Held up.
I can deliver it.
Oh right, brilliant, thank you. Right, so I'm going to pass on. And I will be sending Christine some flowers from us all. Alright. And I'm sure, you know, you'll all join me and just do up in this card in wishing her the very best for her retirement. And, you know, we will miss her. She's been here all the time I've been here. And Stephen, who doesn't seem to be here. And then I'm also going to send around a letter that I've written to both the MPs, so both to Rachel and Ian, and this is about the protected landscapes duty, which the government are talking about removing. We haven't had it for very long, and you know, this is a serious detriment of protected landscapes. So I'm going to send it around so you can see what I've written. It would be great if you have any contact with the MPs, doesn't matter whether they are local ones or further away, because you know, we are a national park. If you would actually raise it with them and try and get a bit of pressure on them about something we've only just recently had, to take it away so quickly, frankly is quite worrying. So I'm going to pass that around so you can see that. Right, minutes. So we need to approve of the correct record the minutes of the meeting of the authority held on the 2nd of September. Could I have a proposal, please? Oh, Mike and Jeremy. All in favour? And as usual, I'm going to go through them. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. Thank you. I have no business of urgency and we have no public speakers. And so we go on to item 7, which is our income generation strategy, and Dan's here to talk to us about this. We seem to talk about this regularly.
Great, well, good morning members, thank you for this opportunity. You've got within your papers obviously a copy of our draft income generation strategy, which we're hoping you will adopt today and covering paper. So I'm just going to give a very brief overview really as to what we're setting out to do with this. I don't think any of us need reminding of this graph, you've probably seen it several times, but really showing how our funding, had it kept pace with inflation since 2010-11, would have been up around kind of, you know, the 7 million mark now, whereas in reality we're hovering around 3 million. So it's about a 57% real terms drop. Yet we're still continuing to try and do everything we've always done in many ways. So this really kind of highlights the importance of bringing in external income beyond our national park grant from DEFRA. And it's not anything new. You know, over the years we've been looking at all sorts of areas of income. These on the screen are just a few highlights of some areas that we've been working on. Within the report I've highlighted a few kind of highlights, if you like. You know, things like Caremore, we've really grown over years. Our centre income has grown. grants. We've been very successful in bringing in some fairly significant grants and legacies that are delivering projects on the ground. So this isn't anything new, but what we haven't ever had before, and something that we put in our corporate plan as a priority action, was to develop an overarching income generation strategy. And really the idea of this is to give everybody, including you as members, also as officers, and our partner organisations, our funders like DEFRA, an oversight, if you like, of what we're doing in this arena, to ensure we've got some consistency, to look at any kind of gap analysis and areas where we think we could or should be doing more, and also to help us prioritise, because there are some bits of income that are very easy to get. They might be small amounts, but it's easy to get. There are others that are a lot harder to get. Some might land a big prize, some might land quite a small prize. So again, part of it is around prioritisation, where we've got limited and finite staff resources to plough into these things, is looking at where do we best put that effort. What's our appetite for risk? These are the kind of things that we're hoping to bring together within this income generation strategy. So say nothing new, but hopefully it does build upon what we've already got. And I think we are heading in the right direction. So again, you've probably seen this graph several times before from Ben, but for 25-26, the medium-term financial plan looks at us having about 50% of our income through the National Park grant, and the other 50% from other sources. There's probably a bit more work to do here. You'll see, the orange is the largest other, and that's 31%, and that's grants. Now that includes grants that we've earned, things like Pioneers and Landscape Recovery and some of the other grants that we've secured, but it does also include things like FIPL, which is slightly different. So I think there's probably a bit more work to look at almost our earned income, but things we've had to kind of earn ourselves versus those things that may have been handed to us in order to deliver. But nevertheless, as I say, we're heading in the right direction. So at the centre of this new strategy is a vision, which is to be more enterprising in our work, increasing income generation to make meaningful and measurable contributions to our purposes. And I want to be very clear here, we have been quite specific at choosing this word of enterprising rather than commercial. And in such debates we often end up saying, well, if we were in the private sector we'd do this, or a business would do that. And I guess our point is that we're starting from a different place here. We have not been set up as a business to generate profits. We are a public service commissioned to deliver on our purposes. So rather than being out and out commercial, I would say there's very little, if any, work that we do that is purely commercial. We're always delivering against our purposes, but if we can offset some of the costs, if we can be a bit more enterprising, the dictionary definition of enterprise is about finding new and innovative ways of working, often around raising money. So I think that's our kind of focus. I think the other thing to say in terms of our focus here, within this specific strategy, we are focusing solely on income generation. We're looking at how do we bring more money into our accounts. There's other things we can do to kind of manage that kind of gap in terms of our funding, around efficiencies, different ways of working, etc., which we've explored, we're implementing, and we're doing it. But this strategy is very much about how do we bring in additional income to support our work. So we've got 3 objectives in there. The first, I think, is, as you would expect, really, it's about securing greater financial resilience so that we are less dependent on our National Park grant, particularly in terms of planning and stuff, where we're always getting use of that very late in the day. If that's a smaller proportion of our overall funding mix, that puts us in a more resilient position. I think part of the strategy, though, is as well about balancing that approach to generating new sources of income, but while still maintaining our focus on delivery of our purposes, as after all, that is what we're here to do. So the income generation isn't a means to an end in itself, but it's a means of delivering our work. And then, thirdly, I think it's around a cultural change. For many years, we've been used to pretty much having our entirety of our funding gifted to us in terms of our annual grant. Obviously, we need to adapt and culturally change as an organisation a bit more, so that we are thinking a bit more entrepreneurially, a bit more enterprisingly, to look at kind of where are the opportunities. And as I say, it's always with that middle objective in mind about how do we balance this. So, for instance, there are always opportunities to charge more for events, but we don't want to do so if it risks us excluding the people that we're are serving as a national park. So it's all about balance. We've put within the strategy a goal which is around our national park grants accounting for less than 50% of our income, but at the same time maintaining our real term spending power against our kind of baseline of last year. So that was prior to the cut that we had this year. So that's still quite a stretch target, I think, to be honest. It's not easy, you know, but the economic climate isn't easy for a lot of these things at the moment, and you know, we see all around us the pressures that other organisations, other businesses are facing. But nevertheless, that's what we're aiming at with this strategy. And we broadly looked at the kind of areas of income into three areas. One is fees and charges. Some of those might be statutory fees where we don't influence the level, such as currently planning fees, you know, government sets those centrally at the moment. Others will be fees, maybe car parking, where we have some flexibility in how we set those. There's then the more kind of out and out commercial activities, so things like retail in our centres, private hire with Pinkery, those kind of things. And then there's grants and giving, so within that would be Caremore and our philanthropic giving, as well as grants which could come from a range of organisations, public, private, voluntary sector. And the strategy sets out a kind of four-step process really around identifying the potential areas, and really we are focusing on areas that we can influence. So we do have some income. I use the feed-in tariffs and renewable heat incentive here as a good example where we are getting some income where we've got renewable energy sources deployed on our estate, such as the turbine at Pinkery. But we have no opportunity to influence that. You know, it's a government set rate. We get what we get. So things like that, you know, and it's historic. We can't really claim anything new now. So we've not included that here, but we have looked at all the other areas where we think we can have some influence to increase income generation potential. There's then a bit of consideration around assessing kind of the merits of exploring that particular issue. And again, it's going back to those objectives. Well, can we achieve it? Can we achieve it without harming our work against our purposes? Can it help us deliver further against our purposes? You know, what's our risk appetite and how risky is that particular activity? And if we agree that it's one we want to implement, we then go on to implementation. And I think the most important step, and often the one that's overlooked, is around evaluation. So we'll make sure that with each area we are revisiting it on a regular basis to think, is this still working for us? And then finally, this isn't part of the strategy, but almost the next step for us as officers will be developing mini business plans. And we've identified, I haven't actually added up how many these are, I think it's about 15 to 20 areas where we feel we can influence our income generation potential, and we'll be developing, we've drafted them already, but we've got a bit more work to do on them, developing some business plans for each of those areas. Very high level, 2 sides of A4 ideally, just so that it gives all officers a bit of an oversight of what we're doing. It will allow us to start prioritising where do we put the energy in. There'll be some which, as I say, are very easy to do and almost a no-brainer, regardless as to how much money they bring in. Others might be a bit more risky or require a lot more investment, and that's where we want to really focus on those where we're going to get the best return. So, you know, there might be some areas where we say it's an opportunity, but we're not going to proactively pursue it. It will be there in the background. If an opportunity comes our way, we may take advantage of it, but there'll be others where we say actually we are going to really focus on that and we're going to prioritise that. So these are the areas that we've identified to date. As I say, our plan is by the new year to kind of have drafted business plans for all of these areas, and as officers we'll be going through and looking at them, and then I think we're suggesting that we would present to the authority annually, probably around March time, in line with budgets, etc. And we would give you an overview of the progress, an overview of the areas we're looking at. So I'll leave it there. You've obviously got the full strategy in front of you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Well, this does seem to reflect on Glover, because my understanding is that a specific recommendation, which I have in front of me, was a new financial model.
Yeah.
And it talks about more money, more secure, more enterprising. So it does seem to be in alignment with Glover back in September 2019. And what it says, in short, is local financial planning as a recommendation. Importantly, alongside central government funding changes, national landscape should prepare medium to long-term financial plans that reflect a more diverse range of income sources to their organisations, complementing core central government grant aid, with growth in philanthropic giving, trading activities and large-scale externally funded projects. This should draw ambitiously on the potential of natural capital principles. So, in principle, it does seem to be consistent with that long-forgotten report, but it is a recommendation, so I would certainly support that in terms of its general principles.
Are you moving?
I'm happy to do so, Chair.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, I don't think Mike's microphone is on.
Oh, sorry.
So he might need to repeat it for the benefit of the microphone.
Sorry, the microphone's on.
Yeah, Mike.
I'm sorry to interrupt the vote, Chair.
Right, I'm going to stop this. Laura, who is going to put a microphone on?
Thank you. Mike is on. Thank you, Dan. I just wanted to offer support in coming up with plans around Caremore for Exmoor. I think there's opportunities there to develop it into a bit of a membership type model where donors get things in return and feel part of the community there. I've seen significant impact with that sort of approach in the charity sector, and I know while we're not a charity, there's lessons we can learn from that, so just throw my hat in the ring to help develop that out. And the question, I know we've got the UK National Parks Foundation that runs alongside National Parks Partnership to unlock that philanthropic charitable giving. Do we have anything locally or an appetite to set up something locally? Because I know some national parks do have that, because there's a whole wealth of income you can drive into sort of supporting the aims of and purposes of the park through that avenue. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Laura, and thank you for the offer of help, and I'm sure we will follow up on that one. In terms of the kind of philanthropic side and the charitable side, there's a couple of things to note here. One is, so there's actually a meeting with National Parks Partnerships last Friday in London, and one of the things they're discussing is the fact the UK National Parks Foundation, which is the charitable body that was set up, to date has only really been used as a vehicle to steer corporate giving, when they said we don't want to give it direct to NPP, which is a limited liability partnership, we want to give it to a charitable body. So it's kind of been seen, you know, they describe it really as a sleeping giant, in that it's probably got a lot more potential, and it was agreed at that workshop that they will start exploring the possibility of using that a lot more proactively around philanthropic giving. That would be at a national level, shared between 15 parks. I think, you know, there's an interesting discussion around how that will tie in, where people have got local bodies, how that works, you know, whether people can give through there but ring fence it for a particular park, for example. And so that might give us some leverage as well, without us having to necessarily set up a new body. That may be a vehicle that we could utilise in the future. Locally, we have got the Exmoor Trust that was set up many years ago, kind of early 2000s, I believe. You know, they had that kind of ambition to be a fundraising vehicle, not necessarily tied directly to national park purposes. Some of it's more around with socio-economics and the kind of duty and kind of community support, but that is a vehicle we can potentially use. And we have looked in the past whether something like Caremore, which is our own scheme, whether we do kind of set that up as a charity. And I'll be honest, there are pros and cons to it. There are people who would much rather give to a charity than give to a local authority. There are obviously some tax deductible benefits for doing that in terms of gift aid and, you know, kind of inheritance tax, etc. But it does also come at a cost, in that we would potentially lose a bit of control, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but we would also have additional costs in that, you know, at the moment that's assumed into our accounts, it's audited, etc. as part of our broader thing. If we set up as a separate body, we would need to have those accounts, you know, run very separately, separate bank accounts, etc., etc. So, yeah, I think it's something almost every discussion about Caremore, we always have that kind of conversation. To date, we felt that the kind of the financial benefit probably to date hasn't kind of been worth it, but I'm very aware that it's a changing picture, and, you know, in the past, Caremore used to raise kind of £4,000 or £5,000 a year, we're now kind of 40, 50, 60,000 a year, sometimes a lot more if we get legacy. So you start being actually the additional costs versus that additional prize may be worth exploring again. But yeah, that's probably a deep dive, and I think that's where, again, these kind of mini business plans, that's where we'll start teasing out that kind of level of detail around, okay, we've got this overarching vision and objective, how do we actually implement that between the individual areas?
Thank you. Susan?
Thanks, yeah, thanks Dan for that. It's really great stuff. I think I've spent my whole life raising money for one charity or another, so I really appreciate that. You know, that it is hard work, that you have to be flexible and you say, as you say, enterprising, and it can sometimes, you know, take so much effort to get very small amounts of money, and so yeah, that trying to balance up where we do invest is really, really important to consider that in detail. So a few things, pick up on Mike's very helpful reminder of Glover, and that use of the word complement, which I think is really important, because obviously the first time I read this, I suppose I was perhaps a bit tired and cynical, and that isn't, and I'm thinking, oh God, here we go, slippery slope of, you know, we know what's happening with DEFRA, and I think it's really important that we stay strong in terms of that. Yes, it does complement, it is the other half of the picture. We need that base money. It's with the national park, we're delivering national park purposes, you know, for the whole country. We mustn't lose, and I know we we're very strong in that when we speak with DEFRA, but it's, you know, my concern is that in the future, 5 years time, we want you to just be doing everything yourself. And I'm perhaps being a bit negative, but I think the word complement is really important, and it's a really good reminder. And I think the way you presented it in terms of the 50% and against the baseline of 24-25 is really good. And of course, it's really important because then we can match with bringing additional money. So I think that's really sound. That's just a bit of a fight, which I know you're all for. It's just a bit of a, we need to stay strong in terms of this can't. Yes, we can do our part, but we also do need that support because of what we're delivering at a national level. The only other couple of things was, I remember a while ago now, when I was in part of the external funding group, and we did have an organization, she was called Josephine, is that right? Who was kind of external funding officer person, and I think she left. But I think at that time she was very involved with the early stages of the HLS stuff, wasn't she, around pioneers and stuff. So I suppose I know she left, and I guess I'm sure the decision that we didn't replace was because of finance, and then other officers have done a great job to take things forward. I suppose the question is, I know how much, I think many of us, I appreciate how much time and effort it takes to do all this stuff, to develop new proposals, to write grants, to source things. You know, is there a need for a role, or can it be, there's the need for a role to be able to, you know, research and identify, can we still subsume that within the existing staff cohort, or do we need, you know, it's just a question, I don't know the answer. I know you'd love to have kept Josie, I'm sure, and you know, that's just throwing it into the mix for the strategy and how we implement it, and how do we do that, and do we need someone who can, you know, join up the dots and go around everyone and go around and do the sort of work that she was doing. So.
Yeah, and I think it's pardon my pun, but the $1 million question almost, and I wish I had an answer as to whether that is the right model, because I think, you know, we've tried it, we've had a few people come and go over years when Josephine sadly was on a fixed term contract, and you know, she chose to leave slightly before the end of that. But you know, it's a long-term game, and often you need to be able to be in post for quite a while to build those relationships and things. So it's a bit of a sunk cost in the first few years, and people start seeing, well, hang on, this is costing us a bit. We're not necessarily seeing the money coming in yet. So it's quite a tricky one to do. I think, you know, we are changing the culture here. I think we've got some good, strong members of the team who are very alert to kind of picking up on grant opportunities, following them up. Obviously, capacity is a huge issue. There is so much more we could do, but again, it's balancing it up, and I guess that's a bigger discussion, you know, beyond my immediate role. But yeah, definitely, it's something I think to be aware of, and I think just picking up as well on that thing around complementarity, and I think, you know, over the years, I don't know how many reports I've seen that have been commissioned, often at a national level, looking at, you know, what is the income generation potential of national parks. And if I'm honest, none of them ever really come up with anything radically different to what we're already doing. But again, it is resource that's hampering us. So, you know, certainly on the philanthropic giving, I think we are all convinced there is more we can do. But it's time and effort, and it's how much time and effort we're prepared to put in before we see a return. So, but I think, you know, there is no silver bullet, is there? There is no kind of simple answer. And, you know, National Parks England recently had another report published around this, and that's kind of led to this discussion about NP UK picking up the foundation and using it more proactively for philanthropic giving, which I think that's a positive step. But beyond that, there wasn't really anything in there that wasn't happening already.
Just come back and just actually reflect on what you just said. Then I think in terms of the you know, the skills and stuff, I guess it maybe becomes, it's more of an issue of making sure that, you know, the staff are comfortable and in developing skills around the fundraising side. Obviously, we're doing really well, so like we shouldn't downplay the fact that we are actually really successful bringing in money already, and people have stepped up and are doing well. Maybe it's just more of a question of are there additional, you know, because you know the whole, you know, security funding is a bit of an art and a science, everything, and so maybe that's just something that would be a better thing to do. Are there some, you know, is there a bit more training support we can give to people in that arena around certain, you know, grant schemes, looking at funding opportunities, writing proposals? But you know, we are doing a really good job, and House did want to just reflect on that as well. And that might be a more sensible and financially achievable way to go.
Thank you. Marcus?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if we've got a seconder for this. If we haven't, I'll second it. What I would say is, I mean, just one great presentation. I think, as I say, it's a strategy, and obviously the details can be discussed individually at any, I suppose, when they come along, as you mentioned with your business plans. What really pleased me, and also the wording that Dan's used is, yeah, enterprising, great word. I think Dan said it as well, but you know, there's many times you've been sat in council meetings and, oh, we need to be more like a business, and we need to be more commercial, and we need to be more like a business. And you're trying to say, but we're not a business, we're a local authority. And, you know, I'm not saying never to switch of me, but, I mean, we talk about culture. Actually, you talk about culture change. I think culture evolves, and I think, you know, rather than changes. And I would say I don't want to change the culture of the park too much, because compared to other bodies, I really like the park. So I think it's the culture. Yeah, so let's hope the culture evolves rather than change. But I just want to say I'm happy to second it. There was one other thing that I talked about. No, I think that was it really. It was that language of enterprising, and I think you just summed it up actually with that previous point where you said you've seen an awful lot of reports in your time. So yeah, I'm happy to second this. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew?
Morning, Dan. Thank you for the report. I'm sure it's quite challenging to know how far to be stretched, and I like the way you've split out, and I think we need to use different languages around when money comes in from fees and charges, the grants, and commercial activities. And I think it's right to focus on the grant application. I think, as opposed to, as you say, you went to forums where you discussed how can we bring income in. I've worked with lots of local authorities to help them bring income in, but the reality is I think for the Exmoor National Park is so small, I think you could waste a lot of time and effort on that, and it requires a culture change. Where I think focusing on the grant applications makes sense, and I think it's good to pull that out. And I think whether there's a business case needs doing about bringing a full-time resource in, and that might be really tracking how much time is spent on applications, and if we had someone even better, what is the payback on that, and actually do a business case on that, because I think that's the way of commercial thinking. You know, if we invest in that, will we get payback? And I would have thought we would. That's where I think it's right to focus on the grant application and not bringing in every stream of income. Although, as you said, not forgetting that that's really important. Dropping the phrase commercial thinking in this document, I think, is probably appropriate, although it mustn't be dropped. I know it's not a business, but commercial thinking is actually about trying to get the most of every pound an organisation has. That's the key thing. It's not about being private, and it is about every pound you have, how can we get the most out of it? And I've worked with local authorities on that, and that's really important to remember, and I think that's a good way to introduce the staff in terms of culture change going forward. We've got money, how do we get the most out of it? So forget bringing income in, it's how do we make the most of that? And that then brings in commercial thinking. How do we procure things? How do we track our costs? Do we have business cases? And that is about how you operate as an organisation. I think, and you referred to training going forward in here, and I think that's really important to introduce that. It's a good thing. It's not bad private sector thing. It's a positive thing. And learning from the private sector on that, so I think that's a good thing. And I've heard some perhaps negative comments about that, but I think holding on to that as a positive is really important. And there's lots out there. And it's far more important to focus on the commercial is about income. There's a lot more to learn on that. A couple of questions. One is, I've asked about the commercial thinking. There's some thought on that going forward. I think commercial thinking is very good to bring into an organisation. And then you mentioned the business plan. I'm used to the phrase business case. And you talked about the best returns. How are you going to measure those returns? Again, this is a way to bring in some commercial thinking. You can use payback, so i.e. we invest this amount of money, how long does it take to get back? Some of those it won't be appropriate for, but some will. If you pay for infrastructure in a car park, how long does it take to pay for that infrastructure? So is it payback, which is a very simple method, or are you going to use more sophisticated ones? That's got the final question.
Yeah, thank you. I think in terms of that last question, it's probably going to be a mix, to be honest. I think, as you've already identified, it's quite a kind of mix of different areas. Now, obviously, at the moment, for example, you know, capital funding isn't a major issue for us, but our revenue funding is. So it might be, even if it's got a long payback, if it's a capital investment that we need to do, but it's going to secure us a decent revenue return, even without paying back that capital, that's possibly something we want to explore in the current era. There'll be others where we do want to look a bit more hard nose. So I think it will vary a little bit between them, but that's that kind of level of detail next. And I think, yeah, completely agree in terms of training, and I think we've got an organisational development strategy, and that kind of highlights the need to be more commercial. And I think that is up for review as well. So I think it's probably something to look at rolling out over the next couple of years, is that kind of training. And now we've got the strategy, we know what we're aiming towards, it's then bringing the staff team with us in terms of where do they fit within that piece.
Thank you. Robert.
Thanks, Dan, very much. And really welcome this. Actually, with the times that we're in now, it's really great to see this formalised. Yes, there's no... What I recognise in there's no real answers, is there? It's a strategy. It's as simple as that. We're just working from the sort of back of some of this, really. There's some quite significant risks here, where you categorise core and non-core income. What is rather concerning when you look at page 6 is that such a huge proportion of our non-core grant income is DEFRA based in one way or another. And that's more than half of it, isn't it? You know, the time you take the FIPL grant, other government grants, the one-off one we've had this year, I assume that was included. Challenges potentially around CS, BPS on our state management. That's a huge amount, and that's at high risk, because looking at how government seems to currently operate, that appears to be determined wholly on a year-by-year basis. Whereas at least our core grant, we've got incremental change, most likely. It's likely to be a percentage change annually, rather than it's going to be there or not. So I think we've got to recognise the level of risk involved here on that, especially within the non-core income, and our ultimate huge dependence on government, on DEFRA there. And I think sometimes this is the opportunity to use some of this, when we can see it properly, to highlight to government, you have a national park, it's designated as such, we have core purposes, but our level of dependence is huge. And in negotiation there, let's make sure that that is seen properly all the time. I think that's where there's a huge value in this, in that we can use what we've got here as a document at some points. A couple other bits. I'm looking around the commercial activity. In some ways, I was quite pleased to see, Dan, that we've recognised that our commercial activity was very, very definitively linked to the stuff that we're doing already, or the assets that we hold. You weren't looking at effectively going into competition with local business, because of course that's always that strange area. And I know that some other parks do, but it's that reputational challenge when we get into that, isn't it? That undoubtedly you're fully aware of. But I think if we also need the support of local business. And I know, you know, just on a very small level, we've had that bit of a challenge, haven't we, over one or two of our site licenses for the likes of an ice cream van or something. And we've got to be able to balance appropriately, and that's why the value of the strategy is so important. We're not landing a sort of instant decision either on members or member staff. There's a strategy behind what we're doing and a reason for it. I'm working from the backwards through my notes here, so. Yeah, I know Mike made reference to Glover, and yes, it's Glover recommendations. It seems to me that we've headed in the direction of Glover, really inadvertently, without realising so. However, there's also that bit when you look at still the level of government intervention here, that it's still relatively limited, the direction that we've moved in. Just around some of the opportunities there that we looked at landscape recovery. Government seems to have stalled on quite a lot of that at the moment, but we were expecting there should be more opportunities there, I would hope. And similarly with green finance, although there are some quite considerable challenges, I suspect, around that.
Andrew, could you turn off the microphone, please? Sorry to interrupt.
And I suppose at some point we will hear whether that significant capital grant, which links to my first comment that we had this year for National Park, is likely to be repeated again. It would be quite nice to know before the end of the year, although I suspect we won't, unfortunately. Similarly with FIPL, the challenges in delivering quite a lot of money in a very short time period makes it really difficult, especially with no idea whether you're going to be able to continue that funding on a similar basis. The only thing I'd say here, just to remind ourselves of the value of this, because it's assessing against risk. And whatever we do in a strategy here, in my view, there is likely to be risk, especially where we're increasingly dependent on external funding. Now, whether that's donations, whether that's charitable donations, whether it's charitable businesses, companies, but the level of risk is gradually increasing, which is not helpful in some ways, in my mind, for long-term planning. So I kind of question you. How do you think you can reconcile the long-term planning and purposes of the park with the increasing levels of risk that we've got to funding? I think there's quite a lot of opportunities in this. I'd like to hear your view, rather than reach the stage where Ben's going to be tearing his hair out, because unlike, we're not like a business, and although we discussed this from a business planning point of view, I can't see a national park wanting to get to the end of the year and say, oh, that didn't work out, we've had to post a loss this year. That's not the way we work, is it? So, there you are. A thought or two from you, please, Dan.
Thank you, Robin. Yeah, Ben, I think you're absolutely right, but it is risky, and I think it is becoming increasingly risky. And I think, you've highlighted the fact that even if we look at our non-core national park grant, a lot of our other funding is still public purse funding, and that is obviously declining. And as that declines, and it's not only declining for national parks, it's across the piece in terms of the whole country, all sectors, and so there's more and more people going after other forms of finance, so that will be charitable or corporate funding. So, it is an increasingly difficult environment in a way to operate in. So I think we need to bear that in mind. I think in terms of a risk, we've kind of outlined some appetite for risk in there, and we say to some extent it will be commensurate with the levels of kind of investment we're looking at. So there will be some things where it's small amounts where we can probably afford to be quite risky. We are a relatively we've got some decent reserves behind us, so we can afford to take some risks that others may not be in a position to. But obviously, as we get to those bigger sums, there is quite a calculated risk to be taken, isn't there? And I think there's something to just be alive to. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that, but it will be carefully examining each opportunity and assessing whether it is suitable in the current climate for us or not.
Thank you. I think I have two more speakers. Dominic.
Yeah, thank you. Just quickly, and being a bit more specific really, particularly around the field services team, timber harvesting and things like that, which appeals to me as a kind of tangible production, as it were, rather than rents or services, as good as they are. And so it strikes me, reading from the gov.uk website, that landowners have the responsibility on a public right-of-way to make sure vegetation does not encroach onto the route. Obstructing a public right-of-way and allowing vegetation to grow is an obstruction is a criminal offence. The authority has the right to demand you remove any obstruction you cause. If you don't, they can remove the obstruction and recover the cost from you. Now, I know there's issue of which authority does that, but if we're going to get commercial about this, one of the best ways to ensure a commercial advantage is to have a monopoly. Having a monopoly on coercion is one of the best ways you can do that. And to what extent have we recovered costs from landowners when field services team has had to clear land from private land in order to keep right-of-ways clear? Bear in mind the law absolutely allows us to do that. Because my impression has been for quite a while that actually, certainly when I've had field services team on my farm when I first arrived here, I couldn't believe it. I said, well, what's this going to cost me? You're going to do this, you do this right away. Oh, no, this is all part of the service. And since then I've discovered that no, that's why I now am down with my chainsaw, particularly after the wind the other day, clearing trees out of the way, because that's my responsibility. Now, I would probably happily pay somebody to come and do that, or, so there's a way of doing this. Either the field services team is coming and saying, look, you know, you need to keep this right of way clear, and if you don't, we'll do it, we'll charge you, or you can pay us to do it. Now, I know this speaks then to spare capacity in the field services team, which is a separate issue, because obviously this only works as a revenue-raising idea if you've got the spare capacity. But it seems to me that there is a revenue opportunity there, and also something about ensuring that landowners are reminded of their responsibilities.
Well, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Oh, Ben's going to come to
Well,
now. We've got very serious.
obviously we can't really, at this stage, do any specifics on this, in terms of amounts recovered, but it does fall into these business planning areas. And it's something, as team members, as officers, as a leadership team, delivery team, we can discuss and work through those scenarios.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I suppose my question is, at the moment, yeah, it's interesting to know, is it possible, right, just because the law says it can be done, but are we the authority to do it, or does this have to be basically routed through the Highways Authority or through the local authority or something like that, which therefore creates another step in the process that doesn't make it impossible, it just means there's another step in the process. Have we done it so far, or did we, and again, this issue comes back to Glover, or did we get into a state of thinking that because we have the budget to keep rights of way clear, it was easy just to go in and keep them clear? Because we have the team to do it, we have the budget to do it.
Okay, I'm going to just stop this now. I think what we're going to do, because it's a big subject, we will come back to you, because I think there's a lot of things to go and investigate in this,
Sure.
and I don't know the answer, but I think it has, me as a county councillor, and there's a few of us in the room, obviously some of the unitary councillors, but in fact county councillors, Highway Authority, I think it would be worth coming back with that, with a comprehensive answer. So I'm going to, then at some point in the next couple of weeks, we'll get together and have a little chat about this, because I think it's important that we get bottom this out. And I'm interested because actually I walked along one of our public rights of way last week and struggled to get over a stile simply because it was so overgrown. So again, you've just reminded me that the landowner should have made sure I could do that without getting my hair all tangled up and caught up in it and screaming for, can somebody get me out of this? I mean, I could have still been sat there starving to death on the edge of the 399, which is not a pleasant place to be. So thank you for that, but we will come back. Thank you. And then I've got Mandy.
Thank you very much. The more money you raise and gain, the more you can do as an authority, so there's an inextricable link there. I think there's a huge amount of potential. I would, without a blink, from a risk basis, look to bring somebody into focus solely for a period, as a trial basis. We had the little step chart there where you looked at the process you're going through. My concern is there needs to be, in addition to that, someone totally separate that's going off and looking at emerging markets, at carbon credits, lots of large companies wanting to tree plant, protect our landscape, bequests. A lot of our charities and organisations in the country, most of their money comes from bequests or donations or monthly giving. I've worked with a number of charities, and once you start to get monthly money coming in, it doesn't have to be huge amounts, but that is new money that can be used. Fantastic work with the Bradley Bridge. People are naturally, where they can be, philanthropic. If there's a reason to donate and give, they will do it. And I would love to see a page with a number of projects we are running that people could donate to. I think there's a huge potential in it. I think that's great, but for me it's that blue sky thinking. I think there's a lot of places we could go to bring funding in to start running more projects. My concern is if it's an add-on and we're reacting to something that comes up, for me I'd like to be a bit more proactive and have somebody focus on it. That's just a feeling that I have, and it's worked with a lot of charities and organisations I've worked with. If it doesn't work, then we think again. But it wouldn't take many monthly donations, annual donations to start to build money quite quickly. That's what I found in my experience. Really happy to involve my concern with what you said is you're looking to bring something to us in February. It's where we can do our thinking and hopefully add to that and contribute to that in a positive way moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen.
Just so we do have that page on Caremore which gives you an update on all the projects that are currently being donated to. So that is there already. Whether we lift the profile on that is a different question.
The other thing is that vehicle, and we talked about charity, we have to find the right vehicles, whether it's large corporate that are looking to be philanthropic, whomever it is, and if the vehicle for some is a charity because of the tax efficiencies of it, then that should be something. I'm not saying everything has to go through that, but for me, provide a vehicle where people can give and tell people you are looking. You know, if you look at the GoFundMe pages, they're raising mega money locally, nationally, and I'm not saying we should do that, but if we are open and say we are looking for money for this project, I think people will give and give generously. That's what I found anyway.
And we have been hugely successful at that, so bridges spring to mind. We're quite good at bridges. Yeah, that's been really helpful because people have something to focus on.
And just to add a last point on that list there, health, NHS, SAS, we've got a lot of organisations working locally where health and wellbeing, mental health, I think there's nowhere better than Park that can help with all those things, and I think there's a lot of conversations that could be had in those fields as well, which is slightly less expensive, but I think moving forward, you know, if we can help people's health, mental well-being, that really does fit with the purposes of the park as well. So I think conversations with others locally, and I've already been asked by somebody actually for a conversation prior to this meeting, so I'll pass those details on.
So I'm going to answer for you because I've actually been here long since both of you. So I have to say that a lot of the health stuff's already happened, and they've got no money. They've got absolutely no money whatsoever now. We were very successful at one point. We talked about this last week, didn't we?
But there's no money.
There's absolutely no money, and I'm not saying to be defeatist, but what I don't want is our officers who are completely overwhelmed at the moment, running off our money actually doesn't exist anymore. But we do look at opportunities. There is still the health and wellbeing group meeting at national. Well, we're not meeting, but we do speak to each other at National Parks England. But it's just been Public Health England doesn't exist anymore, and that's where we were getting our help from. We don't even get any help running our group anymore. I mean, that's how bad it is. Things are not great, I have to say. And I wish there was a pot of money. Sorry, I feel I'm being on a rant now, but I'm going to carry on anyway. I wish there was a pot of money. What I really am disappointed about is that nobody in government sees the value of funding us correctly. We should not be constantly having these conversations about how to raise 2 and 6 out of putting up a car park or something. It's just ludicrous. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. Bill.
Thank you, Chair, Ben and Dan. On the pie chart, I think it would be useful if the National Park grant is split into revenue and capital, because obviously capital is restricted, and following on from your talk last time, I think we should bear that in mind, that that is restricted and it may or may not go up or disappear completely, we don't know, but I think that would be good representation. Also, raising money from various areas is great, but I think there will be costs involved, and that's where the commercial thing comes in. I mean, you have to make commercial decisions. It's cost benefit. And interestingly enough, Dominic just brought up hedge trimming and trimming back hedges. That is a cost to the landowner. So I think landowners have to take that into account when they're in their business. Yeah. But as the National Park, we don't trim back our hedges, or we don't ensure they're trimmed back. And I was only approached last week by somebody concerned in the road between Emma's Grange and Bluegate, which hasn't been trimmed back 2 or 3 years and is out in the road. And I said, whose hedge is it? He said, well, it's a national park. So I think it'd be a good idea, before we start going down the road of telling other landowners to trim back their hedges, we should make sure that ours are. Either we do it or the person who rents the land would do it, I don't know. And Long Holcombe is the same as well, and that's in North Martin Parish, which concerns me more. as we're very particular about, we actually trim hedges in the parish for safety and visibility, and it's quite dangerous now between Grange and Bluegate.
The Chief Executive will go and find out whose responsibility that is and get back to
Thank you.
All right. Right. Any more? Richard?
The thread running through this really asks us to think like an entrepreneur. Well, if we do that, I think we've got to think a little bit outside of the box as well. And we do need to take risks to think like an entrepreneur. And also, I would think, depending on the ideas, and I've got quite a few which I'd like to talk to Dan about at some time, but we'd probably be at odds with some of the local businesses. I'm not really sure exactly what local businesses do, regarding their activities, but there's a lot of activities we can do on the park here, which will generate quite a lot of income. But it would take risk.
So can I ask you to have a little chat with Dan
Yes, I will.
outside the meeting? He'll be around all day, I think, looking at him. Yes, he is.
I will do.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Excellent. Right, we have a mover, we have a proposer and a seconder. All those in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? Yes, brilliant, thank you. So the next item is Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Strategy, and Ellie and another Ben are here.
Morning, members.
Sorry, Claire.
It's me, sorry. I'm going to head this one with Ben, but definitely acknowledging a lot of the work has been done by Ellie and Ben to pull this together, so my thanks to them. It is the morning for strategies, so we have a second one for you. And actually, this one in a respect could be seen to be originating from Glover as well. You know, that was mentioned earlier, but you will recall in the Glover report, one of the key things they looked at was equality, diversity and inclusion, and the aspiration that, in their words, we want to see our landscapes reaching out and welcoming everyone. And I think, that's something that we've always looked to do as part of our second purpose, to provide inspiration and enjoyment. And it's really good to see that that's something that's, reflected throughout the work that we do. And also in our new National Park Management Plan that we've just approved. So we have this aim to be a welcoming place for all, that people feel connected to, improving their health and well-being. And ultimately, we're hoping that this strategy is a way of helping to direct and focus our work to achieve that. And I don't really need to tell you why we're doing this, but it's worth just covering it in brief. Obviously, we have a legal duty to do this, but I think it's far more than that. It's really about who we are as an organisation, and helping to demonstrate that commitment. We are using the word equity rather than equality, just really to distinguish between the fact that there are some people who are more disadvantaged, and in order to to support them, you actually have to put more resource and help into that. So it's just giving that emphasis really to recognising there are particular barriers for certain people that we should be seeking to try and address. We have also incorporated this into our corporate strategy and corporate plan, so we've got a couple of priorities in there around being a welcoming place for, so it's about the place, but it's also about us as an organisation, so our staff and members, and our being a great organisation to work for. And this was something that we identified as a priority action to prepare this strategy. And again, just sort of demonstrating it being a thread that runs through everything. The new corporate values that we recently adopted include that sort of welcoming aim as well.
The strategy has been developed working with our EDI oversight group, which includes a number of staff sort of trying to represent all of the teams within the organisation and also our members. So thank you very much to those members who've been working with us on this. It's sort of setting out this as a long-term commitment, and I say, making sure that we try and embed it into everything that we do. Kind of identifying why it matters, what are the benefits, but also, highlighting everything that we are doing and the actions that the teams are doing. We have identified sort of lead officers, so myself and Ben and Ellie meet regularly just to sort of look at how we're progressing, and we have the oversight group as well to support this work. The officers on the group, we're looking to them to help champion this activity across our organisation and with our partnerships as well. There is a national group that works on this that Ben sits on, so we're looking at how we as a National Park family can work together on this. And we'll also be reporting on our progress, and Dan talked about evaluation and monitoring being an important part of any strategy, so it's the same for this one as well. And we're aiming to do that through our annual corporate plan reporting, so that you can see how this is all progressing. And really, just thought it'd be helpful if we just gave you a few examples, really, and some of the things that are already going on. So I'm going to hand over to Ben to do that bit.
Yeah, just very quickly, because I think strategy is nothing if it doesn't impact people on the ground and make a difference, and I think that's what we've been looking to do. So just some examples, really. I mean, our Young Rangers programme is a good example, I think, of equity in action, in as much as that we really seek to give those young people who maybe wouldn't otherwise have that opportunity to get involved in our work and to come and go through that Young Ranger process. And likewise at Pinkery, we've been very lucky in recent years to attract some additional funding that's enabled us to provide new schools with an opportunity to come for a residential, and obviously with that school you're bringing a whole class of 30 young people, so there's a sort of built-in equity within that, and hopefully by enabling new schools to come, we're kind of changing the culture a little bit in those schools so that they start to see the value of outdoor learning, and they start to develop those links with the National Park, so that's really good. Another quick example around more the accessibility things. Hopefully you're all aware of the work that we've been doing around our series of walks, and one of those is the Exmoor Strolls, which are our most accessible walks. So again, this is something which is a real practical measure for people with limited mobility to get a really good, clear understanding of the opportunities that they can find on Exmoor. I think that's a good example of work that's been going on. Picture at the top there is the Bristol Stepping Sisters, Black Women's Walking Group, who we've worked with for a few years. Really nice bunch. They're coming down on Saturday and doing a walk up to Watersmeet, which is always nice. But again, really good. They don't really need our support now because they're at the stage where they know exactly what they're doing, but they still like to come and say hello. But also been really good, and I find it very useful to have those conversations just around different people from different backgrounds and how they perceive the National Park and what can be done to better enable others from their community to do that. And you'll see Jackie there, that's one of our volunteers from the Hope Centre in Minehead. So they're a group of mostly men that have faced challenges around drug and alcohol dependency, and we've done some really interesting work supporting them. They've been coming up to North Hill doing some volunteering, and again, I think just a very brief snapshot of some of the work we do in some of the groups, and we're hoping that the strategy will enable us to do more and really kind of build on some of that work that we're already doing. That's it.
Lovely, thank you. Emma. Oh, Lord.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say, I think in an increasingly divisive world, this work is more important than ever, to get people with different perspectives together. And I really like the fact you picked up on that it's a national park, so while the resident population may not reflect the diversity of the country, the parks were set up for all, and the original sort of Peak District was people from Manchester working in the factories going into the peaks to get that space to rest and recuperate. And I think Exmoor has a role to do that for the cities around it, for Bristol, Stepping Sisters, for Exeter, Plymouth, and even further afield. And I think it's important that we don't forget that role. I would also say that we've got a line in here about monitoring, and we're monitoring ourselves. I think there's a role to get external people monitoring the work we're doing on EDI, because we are not the most diverse organisation, and I don't think we're best placed to do that work. I recently did some work on the National Trails UK Comm strategy, and they embedded inclusivity in developing that strategy, and one of the steps we went through was working with all the elements to review the strategy and highlight where it might have fallen short in that, in terms of diversity and equity and inclusion. So I would just say, I know there's costs involved in that, but it is worth looking at whether we do that to make sure we're getting this right and we're not missing anything. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Andy. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. For me, it's making sure that this is embedded across every paper, every decision that we make as an authority. I just had a flip back at last year's budget, because I thought I don't recall seeing anything in our budget, and there's one line saying there's been assessed as no adverse impact on any particular group or individual. So for me, it's being mindful that when we are bringing papers forward, that there might well be some we might not have thought about, or we need to think about. It's that reassurance really that whenever we are asked to make a decision, that is part of it and part of our thinking.
Thanks, Andy. That's a value reminder to us all. Susan.
Thank you. Yes, just would echo Laura's remarks. I think when we had the briefing last time, Nelly had that nice quote from John Dow about natural parks being places for all. So this is fundamental representation of that, and very important to do that. And obviously I've been fortunate to be part of the EDA oversight group. And I think the strategy is an excellent place for us to be. I think Laura's comment in terms of monitoring going forward is really important, and also it's very important that we continue to embed and show up and do this stuff in real time. So I would be happy to move the recommendation. Thank you.
That was going to be my next question, so thank you. Can I have somebody to second, please? Oh, Jeremy, thank you. Does anybody else want to speak? Andrew?
Switch it on then. Thank you, Dan, for this, and I'm very pleased that the strategy seems very realistic. I'm thinking straight away, I went to the National Park Conference last year, and equity and diversity, it became divisive actually. It went too far, and I think we've got a middle ground here, so don't get any lessons learned from the conference last year. It was divisive, so I think we've got a good approach here. I think this is very realistic. And I think when I go out on the moors, I see the work done on the open up the footpaths, and I think it's brilliant. More people can get onto the footpaths. Although one thing I wanted to mention, and going back to the previous slide, that gentleman on the off-road vehicle, we need to think about that very spot. We get longhorn cattle grazing, and in me, as I know cattle, I'm a cyclist, it's quite intimidating. And I think it's something you think about. If people like that are using those tracks, and you get longhorn cattle grazing, it's quite frightening. And I think it's going to be an issue going to crop up at some stage. Even on the roads, I find it intimidating on a bike. But that track in particular, there's a lot of longhorn cattle. And I think we need to be one step ahead before something crops up. Because as an able person, it's challenging, but someone in a wheelchair, you are very vulnerable. And I don't know if that's been thought through, but that'd be a
I think it's a really good point, and I think it's just an example of that thinking that we need to do, that it's, having the route, but also looking at the impact of management and other things on potential users.
Yes.
It's a good point.
Whether the collars can be used to keep them away from certain areas. There's one path they got in particular around North Hill, so that's worth thinking. I'm also interested, you mentioned new schools at Pinkery. How far have we sort of gone to Bristol, Bridgewater?
Yeah, I mean, we, in the past we've supported, exactly that, schools from Bristol, from some of the communities that do suffer some deprivation around sort of Weston-super-Mare, Bridgewater, parts of Taunton, but also, closer to home, we've got schools in Ilfracombe and in Barnstaple and in Bideford that are actually in quite deprived areas. So sometimes we don't tend to go much further just because the travel becomes difficult. We have had schools from further than Birmingham, from London, but there's still an awful lot of young people that we can support in a relatively, in the greater Exmoor area as well, which kind of makes sense in a way, because if we're looking to develop those links, it becomes more sustainable as a relationship. But yeah.
And even the local schools, my neighbouring farmer now makes his money by looking after challenged children coming from minor middle school, first schools. So actually helping the local schools is doing more benefit than ever used to. That's where those incomes coming from. So I think getting to Pinkering, I've been to Pinkering, is a great thing. So the local schools is great. So thank you.
Thank you. Francis, then Fran.
Just a quickie on page 3 of the strategy. We talk about there are other forms of diversity within our communities, Exmoor's local communities, and communities local to Exmoor, which means the surrounding area. And we say that the other forms of diversity may not be obvious or presented. They may include this as well as that. Well, I think we need to make sure that we don't forget that there is quite a lot of diversity. It may not be as obvious and clear at first glance, but there is diversity. There is quite a population which is pretty excluded from any involvement. And I just would like us not to forget that, and perhaps to work to a point where we don't have to say it may include, but what we know about it. That's the real thing. And the other bit is, yes, let's look after children who are finding school difficult, but let's educate them too.
Thank you. Fran.
Thank you. Very interesting strategy. And I know it is a strategy, but it would be interesting to have an update to see exactly who is coming to. We've got a picture there of one group who maybe came once in the past year. So how many other groups are we encouraging to come here, and from what areas? Similarly with Pinkery, we've mentioned one school, but we'd like to see, for us, have the feedback of what schools, because you know those schools,
sure, and
you're listing them, but we don't necessarily know. And one school is, out of the whole year, again, is not necessarily a broad and very diverse. So that I'd just like to have a bit more information on the actual statistics. But obviously, I'm not in the strategy, but maybe as an update.
And that's something, because obviously we collect that, and so for every school that comes, we also use a measure percentage of the young people that are eligible for free school meals, which gives us a really good sense of the kind of communities that the schools are coming from. And we've got targets within the management plan about making sure that a certain percentage of the schools that we work with are with schools that have above average free school meals. I mean, it's quite a good metric to use, but yeah, I'm more than happy to feedback to members at some point about that.
Yeah, maybe specifically on that, I mean, one of the reasons I said about, doing the reporting through the corporate plan is that we do kind of, as Ben said, we do collect that information, but it perhaps gets a little bit lost in amongst everything else. So the idea going forward is that we'll have a specific section on the EDI strategy in the corporate plan. So, that will include that data and further information for you. But equally, if you want to briefing or something more specifically to delve into details, then we can look through that.
And in terms of the groups, and again, it's something, we've got some funding through the Exmoor Pioneers project to support what we call kind of Welcome to Exmoor Days, which are effectively, a really simple, supported visit with some transport for groups. And so we've got some more of those coming. But again, if members are aware of any groups that would benefit, then please do get in touch with myself or Lizzie and the Pioneers team, because there is some opportunities to do that at the moment, and we wouldn't want people to miss out. And so do let us know.
Thank you. Can I just thank you all for the very interesting comments. Thank you. So we have a proposer and seconder. All those in favour, please. And that is unanimous. Thank Right, before we go any further, where's Christine's card? I had a feeling it was. I kept looking. I can't see anything. I thought something's failed here. Right, the next item is authority meeting schedule. I'm just telling you that they did this at Severn County Council last week. It was 40 minutes. I do not chair that meeting. We will not be discussing this for 40 minutes. Exactly so. I said that last week. In fact, I actually said, why is this on the agenda? Stephen.
Oh, it was a recommendation.
Thank you.
Well done, Stephen.
Anybody want to say anything? No. All those in favour? Thank you. I'm pleased I said that. I can't believe that they discussed it for 40 minutes. I made a mental note never to turn up to the meeting again. Right, we have some interesting little notes here. I looked at this, I thought this doesn't make any sense. Starters and levers. Nathan hasn't actually started yet. Because this is obviously in the future, but we welcome him when he comes on the 27th. And Daisy and Joanne have left us, and Philip will go in a couple of days. And I'm sure we wish them well. Members' reports, I haven't been advised of any, but we will be talking about Laura in the letter that's going round, but also obviously got stuck with Lee. Public shaming going on here.
I don't mind that, Chair. I don't mind.
So we're going to discuss that.
That's done.
And I have nothing else to say. Does anybody else got anything to say? No? Oh yes, Laura.
Just information point. I noticed Tom Marshall, who used to run comms for Peak District, is in a new position with National Parks England looking after comms.
Yes.
So there's some more visible comms coming out there. So just flagging that.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to end the meeting. We have a quick comfort break, and then we're going to discuss some really exciting stuff, including wild camping. So you are now all interested. Thank you.